Emotional Regulation Workshop, recording number 1. Hello everyone and welcome to the first recording. My name is Alison Keane and I'm an assistant psychologist with the primary care psychology team. This workshop is broken into 6 different recordings and you'll hear my co-presenter Alison last in other recordings. We understand that parents listening to this will have children of different ages and different difficulties, so not all material may be relevant. However, what we do hope for is that everyone will take something from each recording. Today we are going to cover a few topics, beginning with emotions. We are going to learn about what they are and their function. We are then going to look at emotional regulation and how the different parts of the brain are involved in this. We will then take a closer look at an emotion that children commonly have difficulty in regulating, that is anger. We will attach some links to videos that you can watch over the course of the workshop, and we will give you some brainstorming moments also, where we may ask you to pause the recording to jot down some ideas or thoughts on a piece of paper. Emotions, also known as feelings, give us information about what we are going through at the time and how we should respond to that experience. For example, if your childhood pet passes away, you may experience the emotion of sadness. If you smell something bad in the rubbish bin, you might experience the emotion of disgust. These 2 emotions, as well as anger, fear, joy, and surprise, are all examples of basic emotions. Basic emotions can be felt by many different living things, not just humans. Have you ever seen a dog wag its tail? This is how a dog shows joy. However, there are other emotions that are considered to be higher emotions, such as shame, guilt, and pride. These are only experienced by human beings and a few other animal species. With any emotion, your body and mind will experience changes. Emotions are completely natural and are always changing as different things happen to us. Children aren't born knowing emotions or how to manage them. They have to learn this. It is important for children to understand that feelings are valid, normal, and healthy. It is how we express and manage these emotions that matters. Learning to identify our emotions is the first step in being able to regulate and express them appropriately. Emotional regulation is being able to manage feelings so they don't intrude heavily on relationships or day-to-day life. This might involve being able to resist losing it in upsetting or frustrating situations, or being able to calm down when big feelings start to take over. Emotional regulation is not about not feeling. Locking feelings away can cause as much trouble as an outburst. There is nothing wrong with having big feelings. All feelings are valid, and it's okay for kids to feel whatever they feel. What's important is how those feelings are managed. The key is to nurture children towards being able to acknowledge and express what they are feeling, without causing breakage to themselves, their friendships, or other people. This slide includes a link to a video which helps to explain why we can sometimes lose control of our emotions. I'd like to invite you to pause the recording to type the link to the video shown in this slide into your web browser. So, as you would have seen from the video in the previous slide, we have learned about our brain structure and how that relates to our ability to regulate our emotions. However, it is not just our brain setup that impacts on this. Our own past experiences can influence this too. For example, if you grew up experiencing many unpredictable, prolonged, and uncontrollable stressors, such as child abuse or neglect, this may have programmed your brain to be more sensitive to stress, danger, or threat. This helped you to survive at the time. But this may mean that now a seemingly minor stressor could overwhelm your downstairs brain, cause it to take charge, and for you to flip your lid. It is important to note that we do need to encounter some stressors as a child in order to develop resilience and the ability to manage these emotions. It is best if these stressors are predictable, moderate, and controllable, and preferably occur when there is a supportive adult available to help the child in managing these. Knowing how our brains work will be important for learning about what types of emotional regulation strategies to use and when. I'd like you to take a minute now to imagine something. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable, otherwise, pick a spot on the floor to focus on. I want you to picture a toddler crying his or her eyes out. They are at their peak of being upset. His or her cheeks have become bright red with exertion, their wails filling the room. They are breathing shallowly and rapidly, and their arms are flailing about the place. I want you to imagine now that I go over and start to try to reason with the child. I try to ask them, what's wrong? How do you think this will go? I'd imagine that most of you listening were thinking along the lines of that strategy not going well. The child isn't going to be in a place to tell me what's wrong or to communicate their needs. So, what sort of things would be helpful in this situation? Some things that might be helpful in a situation like this are offering a hug, rocking the child, shushing and there-thering while patting them on the back. But why would these sorts of strategies be more effective than something like asking the child what is wrong? Because they impact the downstairs brain, and at peak tantrum or crisis point, the lid is flipped and the downstairs brain has taken over. In the womb, the downstairs brain developed first, and within that, something called the core regulatory network. In the womb, generally, there is a constant supply of food, water, and oxygen. The temperature is suitable and kept fairly constant. The baby's needs are met, and so the developing brain begins to associate the feelings of safety and pleasure with the in utero environment. The in utero environment is full of rhythmic sound, touch, and vibrations. For example, the mother's heartbeat, amniotic fluid moving around, and so on. That's why then, after birth, patterned repetitive experiences, such as rocking, stroking the baby's head in a certain way, baby talk, soft music, and so on, can help to regulate a baby. A core association between safety, pleasure, and rhythmic sensation has been made. Many of the strategies we commonly use to regulate children, ourselves, and other adults alike, such as walking, patting or rubbing someone's back when they are upset, constitute rhythmic sensation. Note that there are plenty of other strategies which can be used also. And don't worry, we will be coming back to all of these strategies in later sessions. As humans, we are sensitive to the social, emotional, and behavioral cues of others around us. We often look to others to gauge how we feel, especially in childhood. One of the most important things to remember is that we will never be able to regulate anyone else if we are dysregulated ourselves, so we need to keep our cool. This is also important because how we relate to others can impact on whether they feel under stress or threat. Our brains often unconsciously size up during our interactions with other people, whether we are getting signals of warmth, acceptance, and inclusion, or whether we are getting signals that we don't belong, or signals that seem threatening. The risk with this is that if a child is getting signals that don't seem warm or accepting, it could cause the child's downstairs brain to feel threatened and to take charge. We need to follow the sequence of engagement, which is regulate, relate, and then reason. If a child is very dysregulated, we first need to regulate them, So strategies aimed at the downstairs brain, which will then bring them to a place where they are calmer and there can be some communication between their upstairs and downstairs brain. We need then to relate to them, so to make them feel warmth, safety, and acceptance, so they don't feel threatened or triggered again. Then we can try and reason with the child and to figure out what their needs are, as they should be able to access their upstairs thinking brain at this point.
We would like you to take a moment to type the link to the video into your web browser and watch the following clip to look at what is going on between Riley and her dad. After watching, have a think about what you noticed about the interaction between Riley and her dad.
As you could see from the video in the previous slide, Riley and her dad seem to have experienced a mutually co-dysregulating escalation. Dad's body language, facial expressions, tone, and chosen words likely served to trigger her threat response and further dysregulate her. She ends up being sent to her room without there being any progress towards helping her sharing and solving her big feelings. The sequence of engagement, regulate, relate, and reason has not been followed.
Now it's time to stop and think about your own child. What are the most challenging emotions that your son or daughter displays? And what impact do these challenges have on their life and those around them? Take a few moments now to think about this in relation to your child and jot down what comes to mind on a piece of paper.
So, as you may have been thinking, emotional dysregulation can have a negative impact on behaviour, on our ability to communicate, our social skills, and also our relationships with family and friends. Research tells us that improving emotional regulation in children and young adults can improve functioning across a wide range of domains, including school, home life, family, and peer relationships. One common emotion that children and adolescents can struggle to regulate is anger or frustration. It is important to note that anger is a completely normal and usually healthy emotion. It can signal to us when we perceive something as unfair and unjust and can drive us towards our goals. It protects our values and beliefs as it is activated when our values are not in harmony with the situation we face. Accordingly, it makes us aware of our deep-seated beliefs and what we stand for. It can also provide a sense of control. If anger becomes overwhelming and disproportionate and we are no longer able to regulate it, this is when it becomes problematic. Some children or young adults show little or no obvious changes in behaviour until crisis point. It appears that they go from 0 to 100 with no apparent cause. However, this simply isn't the case. Generally, a trigger, or more often a combination of triggers, has built up, causing them to flip their lids when they then encounter a seemingly minor trigger. These triggers may be the result of dealing with a combination of demands and challenges throughout the day, which is why sometimes a child may display no stress in school environment, but by evening they are fried by the stress of the outside world. The problem still may be school-based, but manifested at home. If these angry feelings keep building up with no release, they will eventually explode, much like a bottle of Coke fizzing all over the place after it has been shaken vigorously and opened right away.
Knowing our child's triggers is important as it can help us to choose the best tools and strategies in the moment to help them to effectively manage their emotions. I'd like to invite you to take a moment now to stop and think about your own child's anger triggers and to jot down what comes to mind on a piece of paper.
I'm sure you've been able to think of a few different triggers for your own child. It's important to note that each child will have their own set of triggers. Some of the ones that we came up with are academic pressures on homework, fear of failure or ridicule, changes in routine or environment, bullying, certain words such as calm down, bereavement, or parent separation. Anger also sometimes is like an iceberg. Although it is a valid emotion on its own, it can also indicate that there are other emotions hidden under the surface that might need to be addressed or validated. These might be embarrassment, exhaustion, loneliness, or fear. Other times, it could be a combination of several feelings. The child may be unable to identify or express these emotions, and so they express them as anger. Think about it. I'm sure that there has been a time for all of us when we have reacted angrily, when we were simply just tired or even hungry. So, when does anger become a problem? Anger can become problematic when it occurs frequently, for example, on a daily basis, when it is becoming increasingly intense, when it is prolonged, and when it results in aggressive behavior or explosive anger outbursts. Anger is also problematic when it has an overwhelming negative impact on the child, their functioning, and their relationships with parents, siblings, peers, and other important people in their life. We may feel a wide range of bodily symptoms when we are angry, including going red in the face, feeling hot, shaking, fists clenched, heart pumping, feeling like crying, and so on. You might be able to identify that your child experiences some of these when they are angry. The experience of anger can be thought of as a cycle or an arch. It goes up and then it comes back down. It is important to note that we may not always reach the peak or crisis stage of the anger cycle if we use strategies to manage it. In the baseline or in control phase of the anger cycle, the person is calm and displays normal behavior. During the trigger phase, the person experiences a stressor, which may be physical, environmental, or social, such as a loud noise, a crowd, or a demand. This can move into the escalation phase if a strategy isn't used to calm down or to manage or remove the trigger. During the escalation phase, a person shows signs of agitation. Behaviors may intensify, such as pacing, attempting to hit, or becoming verbally threatening. This can progress into the crisis phase if nothing is done to de-escalate the situation. During the crisis phase, the person is out of control and loses ability to process information. The person may be physically or verbally aggressive or engage in self-injurious behaviors. When this behavior reaches a peak, the person may become exhausted and start to come back down. The person begins to regain control and behavior becomes less intense. It is possible that the person could return to the crisis phase again if triggered during this phase. During the recovery phase, the person has regained control but remains fragile. During the crash or post-crisis phase, the person may drop below normal activity level and need some quiet time, such as sleep or to relax. If we think of the anger cycle in terms of the hand model of the brain, during the trigger phase is when downstairs brain is activated, as it perceives that there might be a threat. During the escalation phase, communication between the upstairs and downstairs brain is reduced. The lid is getting ready to flip. During the crisis phase, the downstairs brain reaches the point of being overwhelmed and decides to take over. Communication is cut between the upstairs and the downstairs brain, and we can act in reactive and animalistic ways. We are flipping our lids. There are different strategies which can be used at different points of the anger cycle, but we will be discussing those in a later recording. So some of the key points that we hope that you take home today are that it is normal and healthy for children to experience a wide range of emotions as they are developing. It is important for us to regulate ourselves before we attempt to regulate a child, and an important factor in this is self-care for parents. Improving emotional regulation in children can impact positively on their daily functioning. And lastly, anger is one of the most common emotions that children can struggle to regulate.
In next week's recording, we will be discussing anxiety and special play. Thanks for listening, and we hope that you have taken away some helpful information from this week's recording.
All kids need is a little help, a little hope, and somebody who believes in them.